The city moved like it always did, fast, loud, and unforgiving. Car horns echoed through the streets, conversations blurred into a constant hum, and footsteps rushed past in every direction. No one stopped, no one noticed. It was just another ordinary day in a world that never slowed down. Amid the chaos, Keanu Reeves walked quietly along the sidewalk, his hands tucked into the pockets of a worn jacket. There was nothing about him that demanded attention in that moment. No bodyguards, no flashing cameras, just a man blending into the crowd, moving at his own pace while the rest of the world hurried past. His eyes weren't focused on the towering buildings or the glowing shop windows. They were distant, lost somewhere far beyond the noise around him. There was a heaviness in his steps, the kind that comes from carrying thoughts too deep to put into words. Memories, perhaps, or questions that never quite found answers. He passed by strangers without seeing their faces, absorbed in the quiet storm inside his mind. The city roared on, indifferent, and then something changed. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint sound slipping through the cracks of the noise. A single note, soft, fragile, almost swallowed by the chaos. But it didn't disappear. It grew. Another note followed, then another, weaving together into a melody so delicate, so hauntingly beautiful, that it felt completely out of place in a world this loud. It didn't compete with the noise, it cut through it, like a whisper that somehow demanded to be heard. Keanu slowed, his steps faltered, just slightly at first, as if his body had reacted before his mind could catch up. The sound pulled at him. No, not just pulled. It gripped something deep inside him. He stopped. Right there, in the middle of the rushing crowd, while people brushed past him without a second glance, Keanu stood still. Listening. The melody was unlike anything else. It wasn't polished or perfect. There were small imperfections in the way the notes trembled, subtle breaks in rhythm that revealed the human hands behind it. But that's what made it real. That's what made it hurt. Because this wasn't just music. It was emotion, raw, unfiltered. Almost as if every note carried a story that words could never tell. Keanu's breathing slowed as he turned toward the sound, his eyes scanning the sidewalk until he found its source. And then he saw her. She sat on the cold pavement, slightly, apart from the flow of people who passed her by like she wasn't even there. In her hands was an old, worn instrument, its surface scratched, its edges faded with time. It looked like it had lived 100 lives before reaching her. But she held it gently, like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes were closed. No, not closed. Unseeing. There was a stillness about her, a quiet detachment from everything around her. While the city rushed and roared, she existed in a different world, one built entirely from sound and feeling. Her fingers moved. With careful precision, yet there was nothing mechanical about it. Every motion felt guided by something deeper, something instinctive. Like she wasn't just playing music, she was feeling it, living inside it. People walked past her without stopping. Some glanced briefly, others didn't look at all. A few. Coins lay scattered near her feet, but they seemed like afterthoughts, small acknowledgments in a world too busy to care. But Keanu didn't move. He couldn't. Because something about the way she played. It wasn't just beautiful. It was familiar. Not the melody itself, but the feeling behind it. The quiet sadness woven into every note. The longing. The pain that wasn't loud or dramatic, but deep and steady. Like something that had been carried for a very long time. It reached into him in a way he didn't expect. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind. Moments he rarely let himself revisit. Loss, silence, the kind of loneliness that lingers even in a crowded world. And suddenly, the noise of the city felt distant, muted, like everything else had faded away, leaving only the music and whatever. It had awakened inside him. Keanu took a slow step closer, his eyes fixed on the girl as if trying to understand something that couldn't be explained. Why does this feel so personal? Why does it hurt? The melody continued, soft yet unrelenting, echoing through him in ways he couldn't ignore. And for the first time that day, maybe for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about where he was going. He was only thinking about why he had stopped. Keanu didn't realize how long he had been standing there until the song began to fade. The final note lingered in the air, trembling for just a second, and then it was gone. Just like that, the city rushed back in. Car horns, footsteps, voices. Everything returned to its usual chaos, as if nothing had happened at all. As if that moment, those fragile seconds of something real, had never existed. But Keanu didn't move. His eyes stayed on the girl. She lowered her hands slowly, her fingers resting on the worn instrument as if she wasn't quite ready to let go. Her face was calm, almost expressionless, yet there was something beneath it. Something quiet, something heavy. A few coins clinked into the small space beside her. She nodded softly, offering a faint, practiced smile in the direction of the phi sound, even though she couldn't see who had given them. Most people had already moved on. They always did. But Keanu stepped forward. One step, then another. Careful. Quiet. Like he didn't want to break whatever invisible thread still connected him to that music. He stopped just a few feet away from her. Up close, he could see the details others missed. The slight tension in her shoulders. The way her fingers gently traced the edges of the instrument, almost like she was memorizing it again and again. Her world wasn't built on sight. It was built on touch, on sound, on feeling. And somehow, that made everything she played even more powerful. Keanu hesitated. For a man who had faced cameras, crowds, and chaos his entire life, this felt different, more real. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a bill, but as he looked at it, something stopped him. This wasn't about money. Not really. Slowly, he crouched down instead, bringing himself closer to her level. Close enough to speak without raising his voice, close enough to be heard, not just noticed. For a brief second, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "That was beautiful." The girl's fingers stilled. Her head tilted slightly, as if she was trying to place something. Not his face, not his name. Just his voice. A small pause. Then she smiled. Not the same polite smile she gave strangers. This one was softer. Real. "Thank you," she said gently. And in that simple exchange, just a few words, something shifted. Because for the first time that day, she wasn't invisible. And for the first time in a long time, neither was he. Part 3, unique and short. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the street carried on around them, but it felt distant. Now, like they were standing inside a quiet space the world couldn't quite reach. Keanu studied her more closely. There was something in the way she sat, steady, composed, that didn't match the life she seemed to be living. No frustration, no visible anger, just acceptance, and something deeper. "Do you play here? Every day?" he asked softly. She nodded, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the instrument as if keeping time with a rhythm only she could hear. "Most days," she replied. "It's where people pass by." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a simple truth. Keanu glanced at the small scattering of coins beside her. It wasn't much, not nearly enough for what she had just given to the world in those few minutes. "You're really talented," he said. She let out a faint breath, almost like a quiet laugh. "I just play what I feel." That answer hit harder than he expected, because it explained everything, the imperfections, the emotion, the way every note seemed to carry weight. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing. She was expressing. Keanu looked down for a second, his jaw tightening slightly as something stirred inside him again. That same feeling. The music had awakened. "Where did you learn?" he asked. There was a pause this time, a longer one. Her fingers stopped moving completely. "My father," she said finally, her voice softer now. "Before..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to, Keanu understood. Loss has a way of leaving sentences unfinished. He swallowed quietly, nodding even though she couldn't see it. The air between them grew heavier. Not uncomfortable, but honest. Real in a way most conversations weren't. After a second, she adjusted her grip on the instrument again, as if grounding herself. "Do you want me to play something else?" she asked gently. Keanu hesitated. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately, to stay in that moment, to hear more of whatever it was she carried inside her music. But another part of him, the quieter, more cautious part, wondered if he was ready to feel that again. Still, he gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." She smiled again, just slightly. And as her fingers returned to the strings, Keanu felt it, that same pull, that same quiet force drawing him in. This time he didn't resist it. The first note rose again, soft, trembling, but stronger than before. Keanu felt it instantly, not just in his ears, but somewhere deeper, somewhere harder to ignore. He stayed where he was, crouched beside her, no longer aware of the people, brushing past or the noise trying to break through. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing did, except the sound she was creating. This melody was different, slower, heavier. It carried something unfinished, like a story waiting to be told but never fully spoken. Keanu's gaze lowered, his expression tightening just slightly. He didn't need to ask what it meant. He could feel it. The pauses between the notes said more than the music itself. There was loss in it, and longing, and somehow, hope. His hand rested loosely against his knee, but his fingers curled slowly, almost unconsciously, as if holding on to something slipping through his grasp. "Do you ever play anywhere else?" he asked quietly, his voice careful not to disturb the flow. She didn't stop playing. "No," she said gently between notes, "just here." The simplicity of that answer hit harder than it should have. Just here, on a cold sidewalk, in a world that barely noticed her. Keanu exhaled slowly, his eyes lifting back to her. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just talent. This was something rare. Something the world shouldn't be allowed to miss. And for the first time since he had stopped, a thought formed clearly in his mind. Maybe this moment wasn't meant to end here. Part 5, unique and short. The song drifted to a close, softer this time, like it didn't want to leave. Her hands rested again, lightly, as if the silence itself needed care. Keanu stayed quiet for a second, then reached into his pocket and placed something beside her. Not a coin this time. She sensed the movement. "You don't have to," she said gently, her head turning slightly toward him. "I know," he replied. There was something in his voice that made her pause. Not pity, not obligation, something else. He hesitated, then asked, "If you could play anywhere, where would it be?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the instrument again, slowly, thoughtfully, like she was searching for the shape of a dream she rarely allowed herself to touch. Somewhere quiet, she said at last, where people actually listen. Keanu looked around at the rushing crowd. No one was listening, but he was. And in that moment, a quiet decision settled inside him, firm, unshakable. He nodded, slightly, more to himself than to her. "Yeah," he murmured. "They should." He rose slowly, as if standing too quickly might break the fragile thread between them. For a moment, he just looked at her. Really looked. Not as a passerby. Not as someone dropping money and moving on, but as someone seeing what others had missed. "Hey," he said gently. She tilted her head toward him again. "I'll come back," he added. It wasn't a promise filled with drama. It was quiet, certain. She smiled faintly. "People say that sometimes." Keanu's lips curved just a little. "I'm not people." There was something in the way he said it, calm, grounded, that made her pause. He stepped back, then turned, blending once again into the moving crowd. Within seconds, he looked like just another stranger walking away. But his pace had changed. His thoughts were no longer distant. They were focused. Because as the city swallowed him up again, one thing was clear in his mind. This wasn't where her story ended. The next day, the city felt the same, but something beneath it had shifted. She returned to her usual spot, settling onto the pavement with familiar care. The instrument rested in her hands like it always did, steady and known. People passed. Coins fell. Nothing seemed different. But then, footsteps slowed. A voice she didn't recognize spoke gently. "Excuse me, are you Lily?" Her fingers stilled. She nodded, cautious. "We're from a small music venue," the man continued. "We heard about you. We'd like to invite you to perform tonight." Silence. For a second, it didn't make sense. Opportunities like that didn't just appear. Not here. Not for someone like her. "Tonight?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said. "Everything's ready. You just have to come." Her grip tightened slightly around the instrument. Fear flickered in her chest, but so did something else. Hope. Miles away, standing quietly in the back of that same venue, Keanu watched the empty stage. No spotlight on him, no attention, just shadows, waiting. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments aren't the ones you stand in. They're the ones you create for someone else. Part 8. Unique and short. That night, the stage lights felt warmer than she expected. Lily stood there, her fingers trembling slightly over the strings, the quiet hum of the audience pressing gently against the silence. She couldn't see them, but she could feel them, waiting, listening, for her. She took a slow breath and began. The first note rang out, clear, steady. Then another. Within seconds, the room changed. Conversations faded. Movement stopped. Even the air felt still, as if the entire space had chosen to listen at once. The same music that once struggled to survive against city noise now filled every corner of the room, strong, undeniable, alive. And this time, no one ignored it. In the shadows, Keanu stood quietly at the back, his eyes fixed on her. There was no smile, no need for one. Just a calm, steady presence, as if this moment was never about him. It never was. On stage, Lily played like she always had, not for applause, not for recognition, but because it was the only way she knew how to speak. But tonight, the world was finally listening. The final note lingered, then faded. For a heartbeat, there was silence. And then, Applause. Not polite, not casual, powerful, emotional, real. It rose like a wave, filling the room, reaching her in a way she had never felt before. She stood there, frozen, overwhelmed, her breath catching as the sound surrounded her. Someone stepped onto the stage. "Lily," a voice said gently, "there's someone who made tonight possible." Her heart skipped. Footsteps approached. Slow, familiar. She turned instinctively toward the sound, her expression uncertain. "Why?" she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. A quiet pause, then his voice, calm, steady, unmistakable. "Because you deserve to be heard." Her breath caught. The realization settled in slowly. Then all at once, "You," she whispered. Keanu didn't step forward into the light. He didn't take the moment. Instead, he let it belong to her. Tears filled her eyes as her fingers tightened around the instrument. Not out of fear this time, but something deeper. Someone had listened, truly listened, and because of that, everything had changed. As the applause continued, louder than ever, Keanu quietly turned and walked away, disappearing once again into the background, unseen. Just like he intended. But behind him, on that stage, a girl who was once invisible was finally being seen.